Hi, welcome to another Tech Talk video. When you first install Git and try to clone or push a repository to your GitHub account or remote repository, you will need an authentication method to connect your terminal to your GitHub account. In this video, I'll walk you through three main Git authentication methods, including personal access tokens, Git credential managers, and SSH keys. And I'll show you how to set up and use them. So let's get into it. First, let's define our terminology. So repo is a short way of saying repository. And a remote repo is a repository on GitHub website or on a GitHub account. And a local repo is a repo on your computer. Often you would want to write a code on your computer and push it to your GitHub account. So you would need a method to connect your remote repository to your local computer or local repository. There are two ways you can connect your remote repository, either using HTTPS URL or SSH URL. And you can find both of these URLs in GitHub, which I'll show you shortly. So I created a private repository for this tutorial. I called it private Git. So if you go to this repository in your GitHub account, you'll find this code button. If you press this code button, you under clone, you will see HTTPS. And this URL here is your HTTPS URL. You can go ahead and press that double square, which will copy that URL for you. And now we can go to our terminal and git clone and paste that URL to clone the remote repository into a computer. So as you can see, this is HTTPS and HTTPS URL. And if you press enter now, you will try to clone. You'll ask for our GitHub username. We can type in our username and password. So if you type your GitHub password here and press enter, it says support for password authentication was removed on August 13, 2021. So previously you could use your GitHub user pass for this, but now it will not work. So what to do now? This brings us to our first authentication method, which is personal access token. I will show you how to set up this personal access token and how to use it for authentication. Just go back to your GitHub account and press on your profile here and go into settings. So if you scroll down, you will find developer settings here. And if you click on the developer settings, you will find personal access tokens. So just click on personal access tokens and tokens classic. And you'll find generate new token button here. So we want to generate a classic token. Just press that and enter your password for your GitHub. Press confirm and it will show the personal access token form. So in the note section, you can write any note for your own personal reference. I'm just going to write, this is for testing. And the next option is expiration date. So you can set an expiry date for your token. You can say I want this token to expire at 7, 30, 90 or any number of days that you can set up, or you can say no expiration, which the token will not expire. So this is just another security measure that you can take just in case your token compromised. So if I select 30 days, it says it will expire on this date for my case. The next is you can select the scope of the token. I want to select the repo, which will give me access to do whatever I want with my remote repository. Depending on what you need, you can adjust this. You can select only 1 or 2 of these. You may want to only commit, or you may only want to pull or push. But for our case, repo gives us full access to communicate with our remote repository. Depending on your need, you can select any of these options here, but I'm just going to leave it for now. You can just go ahead and have a read and see what options do we have available. And you can just generate the token and it will generate that personal access token for you. So just bear in mind, this is a private key, so you shouldn't share this with anyone. Obviously, will delete this key later, so it doesn't matter if you're seeing it now. For now, I'm just going to copy this key and just going to paste this key in a text document. So I don't recommend you doing the same, but for the sake of tutorial, I'm just going to paste it in this text document. Now I'm just going to go ahead and run this command again. Run the same command, git clone, and that URL that we copied. Again, it will ask for us for our username. You can just go ahead and type your Git username. And here, instead of password, what we can do is we can copy this personal access token and paste it instead of our password here. And if you press enter, it will go ahead and clone that repository. So it does that authentication for us. And we can actually go and check, and we'll see the private Git. We can go into the cloned repository and you'll see all the files here. So it was successful. One problem with personal access tokens is that you always will have to use that password. So if you do it again, if you clone another, if you want to push it, you have to use your username and password. So it does not remember that for you. So you either need to have this file, which is not the best practice or the secure way, or you will have to go ahead and use this personal access token every time. So if someone accesses this token, obviously they can go into your private repositories. I'm just going to show you how you can delete this access token that you have. Just go back to your GitHub and you can press delete and it will delete that token here. So no one can use this token anymore. Another way of authentication, which is the preferred way, is git-credential-manager. So with this method, you only need to set it up once and log in once, and it remembers that after you logged in the first time. So that's why it's the preferred method of authentication for connecting to the GitHub using HTTPS URL. So you would normally install the credential manager while you're installing Git on Windows, but for any reason, if you did not install it, you can go ahead and install it separately, standalone, from this URL, which I will post in the description of this video. So you can go ahead and install it for your machine. If it's Windows, there's .exe file. You can click on it and follow the instructions to install it. So if you're using the GCM or Git Credential Manager in WSL, which is something that I'm doing, you need to set the Credential Manager as the default authenticator for Git. So to do that, just copy this code, git config global credential helper, and this is the path that you installed the Credential Manager. So this is the default path that it, if you didn't set it up yourself, this would be the default path. So just run this command, and let's try to do the git clone again and see what it does. So it's trying to clone this, and it pops up this window. So this is the Git Credential Manager. So it asks you to sign in with your browser. So you can use the code, or I'm just going to sign into the GitHub with my browser. It says, so I'm already signed in, so it says authentication succeeded. And let's see what happened. Yeah, there you go. Now the cloning is successful. So I only needed to do this once. So let's say that was the private Git repo here, which we just cloned. Let's say if I remove this private and I just want to do it again. So I removed it now. I'm just going to clone it again. I'm just going to show you that this time it will not ask me to log in. It will just automatically pull that because it remembers that I logged in previously. So this is one of the reasons that this is the preferred method for using HTTPS URL for connecting this. Now let's go and see how we can connect to the remote repository using SSH keys. Now, if you remember, we said that there are two methods or two different URLs that we can use to connect to a remote repository. One was HTTPS URL, another one was SSH URL, which you can find both here under the codes button. You press this. This is the HTTPS URL that we used, and we had two different authentication methods that we could use for the HTTPS URL. But for SSH URL, you will need to generate a SSH key pair first. So SSH URLs basically provide access to a Git repository via SSH, which is a secure shell protocol. As I said, to use this URL, you have to generate a SSH key pair on your computer and then add the public key to your GitHub account. If you haven't added the public key to GitHub account, it says here, if you press SSH here, it says you don't have any public SSH key in your GitHub account. So unless we set this up, we won't be able to use this URL to connecting to this remote repository. So let's go ahead and see how we can set up the SSH key pair. Just open your bash terminal. I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux here. So to create the SSH key on your local computer, just go ahead and copy paste this code, and instead of your email.example, just put your email address here. So in my case it's .com, so I'm just typing in my email address. This is the email address for the GitHub account, of course. So I will put this command line in the description below for the video. So just copy paste and replace the example email with your own email address. So, and then press enter. So here it's asking that where do I want to store the file for these SSH keys. So I'm just going to leave it as default. So by default, it will be in my home directory under .ssh directory, and this is the ID of the key. So if you press enter, it asks for a passphrase or password. You can leave this empty, but if you want to protect it with password, you can protect it with password. If you put a password now, you have to, every time that you connect to the remote repository through SSH key, it will ask for your password. So I'm just going to leave it blank. Just press enter, enter, and it will generate SSH key for yourself for your machine, on your machine here. So now that we generated this, there is one more step that we need to take, and that is going and adding this SSH to our SSH agent. And for that, just copy paste this ssh-add, and this is the directory that our file was generated. And if I press enter, it says could not open a connection to your authentication agent. Okay, so this means that our authentication agent is not running. Just go ahead and run this command, which will start the authentication agent, and then you can ssh-add and run this command again. So I'll put all these commands that you need to run in the description below. After you run the ssh-add command, it says that identity added. Now the only thing that you need to do is to copy the content of that public key that we just created. You can go ahead and open the file and copy the content, or you can use clip.exe command, which basically will copy the content of the SSH with this id.pub into the clipboard. And now you can go to your GitHub account, and on the settings find SSH and GPG keys. So if you click on that, you can add a new SSH key and just copy the content under keys. You can add a title or description. I'm just gonna add Dr. Tech Talk key and add SSH key. And there it is. So now we added our public key here, and we have the private key stored in our local computer. So now if I go back to my repository and go to the SSH, and now I can copy this SSH URL and say, I can say git clone and paste this SSH URL and enter, and it will, for the first time, it will go and ask me that do you want to continue, add this SSH key and connect to the remote repository. And if I say yes, enter, it will add that key as a known host, and it will go ahead and clone that repository for me. So now I'm connected to this remote repository. I can pull, push, do whatever I want with this my remote repository, and I authenticated myself using the SSH key pair.